My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
To me, ultimately, martial art means honestly expressing yourself. Now, it is very difficult to do. I mean, it is easy for me to put on a show and be cocky and be flooded with a cocky feeling and then feel like pretty cool and all that. Or I can make all kinds of phony things, you see what I mean? Blinded by it. Or I can show you some really fancy movement. But to express oneself honestly, not lying to oneself, and to express myself honestly, that, my friend, is very hard to do. And you have to train. You have to keep your reflexes so that when you want it, it's there. When you want to move, you're moving. And when you move, you are determined to move. Not taking 1 inch, not anything less than that. If I want to punch, I'm gonna do it, man, and I'm gonna do it, you see. So I mean, so that is the type of thing you have to train yourself into it, to become one with the... All type of knowledge ultimately means self-knowledge. So therefore, they're coming in to, and ask me to teach them not so much of how to defend themselves or how to do somebody in. Rather, they want to learn to express themselves through some movement, be it anger, be it determination, or whatsoever. So in other words, what I'm saying, therefore, is that he is paying me to show him in combative form the art of expressing the human body. But martial art has a very, very deep meaning as far as my life is concerned, because as an actor, as a martial artist, as a human being, all these I have learned from martial art.
There is the finger jab, there is the punch, there is the back fist and then low. Of course, then they use leg, straight at the groin, or come up. Or, if I can back up a little bit, they start back from here and then come back.
I do not believe in styles anymore. I mean, I do not believe that there is such thing as like Chinese way of fighting or the Japanese way of fighting or whatever way of fighting. But if you do not have styles, if you just say, well, here I am, you know, as a human being, how can I express myself totally and completely? Now, that way, you won't create a style, because style is a crystallization, you know. I mean, that way, it's a process of continuing growth. I mean, here it is the natural instinct, and here is control. You are to combine the two in harmony. Not, if you have one to the extreme, you will be very unscientific. If you have another to the extreme, you become all of a sudden a mechanical man, no longer a human being. So it is a successful combination of both. So therefore, it is not only, so therefore it's not pure naturalness or unnaturalness. The ideal is unnatural naturalness or natural unnaturalness. I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. You put it in a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
1.5 million years, the Earth's climate has fluctuated, cycling from ice ages to warmer periods. But in the last century, the planet's temperature has risen unusually fast, about 1.2 to 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Scientists believe it's human activity that's driving the temperatures up, a process known as global warming. Ever since the Industrial Revolution began, factories, power plants, and eventually cars have burned fossil fuels such as oil and coal, releasing huge amounts of carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere. These greenhouse gases trap heat near the Earth through a naturally occurring process called the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect begins with the sun and the energy it radiates to the Earth. The Earth and the atmosphere absorb some of this energy, while the rest is radiated back into space. Naturally occurring gases in the atmosphere trap some of this energy and reflect it back, warming the Earth. Scientists now believe that the greenhouse effect is being intensified by the extra greenhouse gases that humans have released. Evidence for global warming includes a recent string of very warm years. Scientists report that 1998 was the warmest year in measured history, with 2005 coming in second. Meanwhile, readings taken from ice cores show that the greenhouse gases carbon dioxide and methane have hit their highest levels in the past 420,000 years. Arctic sea ice is also shrinking. According to NASA studies, the extent of Arctic sea ice has declined about 10% in the last 30 years. As long as industrialized nations consume energy and developing countries increase their fossil fuel consumption, the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere will continue to rise. Researchers predict that temperatures will increase about 2 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit by the end of the century. What's less certain is what rising temperatures mean for the planet. Some climate models predict subtle changes. Others forecast rising sea levels which could flood coastal areas around the world. Weather patterns could change, making hurricanes more frequent. Severe droughts could become more common in warm areas, and species unable to adapt to the changing conditions would face extinction. Although much remains to be learned about global warming, many organizations advocate cutting greenhouse gas emissions to reduce the impact of global warming. Consumers can help by saving energy around the house, switching to compact fluorescent light bulbs, and driving fewer miles in the car each week. These simple changes may help keep the Earth cooler in the future.
These are all about the gnarly rides and epic sales. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 10 extreme sports. Stop. For this list, we're looking at recognized extreme sports that involve a bit of skill, technique, and intelligence. So with all due respect to the running of the bulls, which involves running and attentiveness, that event didn't make our list. Number 10, bull riding.
Play the game, you take the pain, you know the dangers, and you're willing to pay for them to do what you love doing.
So you think you're a tough guy, eh? Well, let's see you last 8 seconds getting your ass or twig and berries handed to you on top of a raging bull. Some people get their kicks by running away from such beasts. But whether you're an American rider or one overseas, there's nothing quite like the intensity of preparing for and executing this challenge.
You step off of one of those bulls, you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
It takes a certain breed to sustain this kind of lifestyle. And while people flock to events to see bull riders do their thing, there's not much they can do when the bull hits the fan.
And then all of a sudden, going from perfect to horrible.
Number 9, volcano surfing.
I push off. Moments later, I'm ass-turning down the pumice.
The advent of this 21st century extreme sport has been credited to Zoltan Istvan, and it involves a bumpy ride to the dark side of an actual volcano. That's right, a couple thousand years ago, the poor residents of Pompeii were essentially buried alive thanks to Mount Vesuvius. And now, adventurers fight back against volcanoes, so to speak, by getting all up in their business. Go! Yeah! Times have changed, of course, but one must always be aware of getting all carved up by chunks of ash and flying debris. Oh yeah, the explosive lava is something to think about as well. Number 8. Ice climbing.
It's a 100-meter vertical ice shield, nearly rock hard because the sun never hits it.
We all know that mountain climbing is for pansies, right? So that's why this slippery sport has gained such momentum in recent years. We're kidding, of course, as both rock and ice climbers are equally adventurous and crazy. Whether you prefer alpine ice or water ice, the basic laws of nature apply when climbing up a frozen waterfall. One does not simply ice climb. One comes ready with all the appropriate gear, prepared for perhaps the most exhilarating feeling in the world, and maybe a nasty fall. Number 7. Highlining. Some of you may already highline on a daily basis, but probably not quite like this.
My name is Philippe Petit. I'm a wire walker.
Featured in the 2015 film The Walk, highlining is the form of slacklining that is done at challenging heights. This sport requires some intellect when setting up the anchor points, and of course, one must be in tip-top shape and be able to focus too, as the ultimate fail would be plummeting to your certain death. It's only been since 2010 that slacklining has really become popular, particularly in the form known as tricklining, and it builds on the examples of past high-wire artists for more creative expressions of freedom. Number 6. Skateboarding. Alright, so skateboarding probably doesn't seem that extreme these days. At least not if you're at the Bart Simpson it's faster than walking skill level. But every self-respecting skater knows that some broken bones are necessary if you want to call yourself the real deal. We don't really need to explain the essence of this extreme sport, as YouTube has become a haven for countless skateboarding fails, and also some rather impressive feats. The activity is something of a gateway sport for extreme individuals, and a culture in its own right. You either skate or you don't. Number 5. Creaking, also known as steep creaking. Sure, one may enjoy kayaking or canoeing, but that doesn't necessarily mean you enjoy literal downward spirals off waterfalls. But if this does sound like you, then you're a creaker. Congrats on having a name. What do you need besides a kayak and a death wish? Well, a first aid kit might come in handy, and you'll certainly need a throw bag and face mask. Those living in the Appalachians have come to know creaking all too well, and there's nothing like experiencing a first descent, whether it's your own or with somebody else. Beware of chicken heads and sieves, and always creak with confidence. Number 4. Ice cross downhill, also known as downhill ice cross.
I'm high in my life right now, nothing like it.
The average person typically struggles when trying to lace up a pair of ice skates, and even more so with the actual act of skating. But if you grew up playing hockey and know how to maintain a certain balance, then you'll find some value with ice cross downhill.
Holy moly! Hey! Do you think they can go any faster than me?
Here's what happens. Skaters shoot down a walled track and try not to break their asses. It's just like downhill skiing, except with sharp skates and hard ice. As you can imagine, the average ice cross downhill fail will make anyone wince, especially if you happen to be executing the failure in question. Number 3. Motocross.
Gotta always jump something.
Speaking of ice, the one and only Vanilla Ice once reigned supreme in this extreme sport, as he was reportedly a 3-time Grand National Champion in Dallas.
Go Ninja, go Ninja, go! Go Ninja, go Ninja, go!
You could say that motocross was the next step up for skaters during the 80s, along with BMX riding. Numerous sub-competitions have emerged from this vehicular activity, whether it be freestyle, supercross, or whatever competitors come up with next. Some fly high while others keep it low, but motocross has long been a favorite among your more liberal motorcycle enthusiasts. Number 2. Free climbing. Now the big question. Are you an aid climber or a free climber? Not sure? Well, if you're the former, you'll need some help reaching your destination. But if you're the latter, then you're on your own. Literally.
You know, you commit, you're like, I'm doing this, here I go. But then after like a couple hours of being all committed, you're like, man, I'm tired.
Sure, free climbers take the appropriate measures to prevent, death. But the point of it all centers on the trendy concept of do-it-yourself.
There's always that one glance down inside of the corner of your eye. Because once you make the turn and look, you're like, oh man, I am high.
When you're a kid, you climb trees, but if you're an experienced free climber, you reach a bit higher. Some question the motivation of free climbers, which does make sense, but perhaps you just don't understand the feeling of exhilaration.
It'd be sort of like asking a gymnast what they're thinking about while they're doing the routine. Ideally, they're just executing it perfectly.
Before we unveil our number one pick, here are some honorable mentions.
It feels good to be out here, to be back on the trail, making miles.
Number 1. Wingsuit flying, also known as wingsuiting. If you're too scared to skydive or base jump, then you definitely won't be wingsuit flying. With the suit itself emerging in various forms since the late 90s, one may actually transform into a Birdman, a Batman, or even a squirrel, depending on your stylistic preferences while practicing this sport. Of course, a parachute will be needed for a safe landing, and you may also need a hefty set of balls or a sturdy pair of ovaries. With the arrival of jet-powered wingsuits in recent years, there's no telling how this extreme sport will evolve for space oddities in the coming decades. Do you agree with our list? What's your favorite extreme sport?
You just have to hang on and, figure it out and fight.
For more mind-blowing top 10s published every day, be sure to subscribe to WatchMojo.com.
It might not be the toughest route in the world, but given that most people would be happy just to make it up a flight of stairs dressed like this, it's a pretty good...